Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, and today we have Idris Grey, and she is a writer, an experienced authenticity sensitivity reader, and a book reviewer for Publishers Weekly. They've been posting stories on Wattpad since 2013 and have accumulated over 200,000 reads on this platform. They won the LGBT Watty Award in 2015 for their FF romance Girls Chase Girls and were longlisted for their FM romance The Fashion of Love in 2018. They've been a sensitivity reader since 2017, a professional book reviewer since 2018, and a Wattpad Star since 2019. They were a finalist in Harlequin's romance Includes You Mentorship Program in 2019 before they signed with literary agent Claire Friedman from Inkwell Management in 2020. They've written for The Lure, Radish, and Stori fiction apps, among others. They're currently pursuing traditional and non-traditional publication. So welcome to the show, Idris.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, before we got on, I was commenting about how you've done so many different things. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you started writing?
All right. So I've always been a storyteller. I started when I was when I was a baby. I'm an only child. So I was always telling myself stories. And then I got into fandom and fan fiction when I was about 9. And then when I was about 15, I started deciding to kind of write my own stories. And it was about 2013 when I found Wattpad, and when I decided to see if my original non-fan fiction stories would be interesting to other people.
Cool. So how do you get involved with Wattpad? You've won a lot of awards and you've accumulated a big readership there. So how did that get started? How did you build up? How did people find you at the time?
So the really cool thing is, I've always told stories, but Wattpad stories were getting pretty big at that time. Like one you may have heard of, either The Kissing Booth or After, that were adapted into movies or TV series. And so I just kind of heard about it online. So I decided in 2013 to try my hand at it, just to see what kind of community there was. And the way I got attention in 2015 specifically was I wrote for a story contest, and it was for a Valentine's Day contest. That's where my story, Girls Chase Girls, comes from. It was based on The Outsiders and Grease, the S.E. Hinton novella. And so I got that, and it really took off. It was tied for number 1. And it took off, and it caught the attention of someone at HQ, the headquarters for Wattpad. And that's really been the big mover and shaker of my success there ever since, because they've really loved the story. And they've actually been working towards adapting the story for film since then. And I can't talk about it over much, but fingers crossed, because there seems to be some movement on that. So that's really what did it. Luck in a lot of ways, right story, right time, and a lot of passionate people who really wanted to see it succeed.
Are you still doing stuff on Wattpad, or?
Yes, I do write on Wattpad, though not as often as I used to. Since I started in 2013, I've gone to grad school and then back to culinary school and dealt with the pandemic. So I'm not as prolific there as I used to be. But I've expanded outwards. I've tried other writing platforms, and like Inkit and Tapas, and I've moved on to serialization platforms like Radish and Lure, and some other upcoming platforms like Kindle Vella by Amazon, just to see how I like sort of being in control of my writing in that way, and especially in a way that is more immediately financially lucrative. Yes. So yeah, I've done it a lot of different places. Love Wattpad because there's a lot of opportunities, but it never hurts to expand your options, right?
So having so many different platforms, has it helped you? Because we were talking about how you're actually an epidemiologist, right? And how you were not working. Well, at the time after you graduated, there weren't any jobs, and now suddenly, bam, pandemic. But
they're everywhere, right? But it has been helpful. I've made, because there's so many different ways to make money when you're doing sort of not hybrids. We talked a bit about what that specifically means, but so many different platforms monetize in different ways. So you'll have some that will do work for hire, which is kind of a whole different thing, where you don't really get your name on things, but you do get paid. And then there are other ones where they'll pay you a flat fee up front just to license your work so they can post it, because it'll drive traffic to their platform. And then there are other ones like, say, Radish or Kindle Vella, where in exchange for coins, you'll earn royalties for posting your work on a given platform. So, and Wattpad has its own different monetization schemes that are also nice, but they're a little harder to access. So I tried them all because I do want to write for a living at some point, and I recognize that relying on just one platform to do that is just not practical. You know, publishing is a long game, and sometimes it's very long. And so I try to make it a little easier on myself by giving myself a lot of different options.
Yeah, this reminds me of my friend who's actually a geriatric nurse, but she's an
Hmm.
actor, but she's like, I
Hmm.
like eating, so I'm still a nurse. You
I
know?
can't eat my potential, it's not edible. There's no calories in your potential.
Yeah.
So I totally understand.
So let's talk
Um,
a little bit about how you became a reviewer. Like,
mhm.
so why did you decide to do some reviewing for Publishers Weekly? That's totally different from writing. I mean,
It is. So it's a couple of different things. One, when I was in grad school, I was actually a graduate teaching assistant for the writing program, the scientific writing program, because I've been writing my whole life, and that skill is very useful. Um, so that kind of has allowed me to access a lot of different writing and publishing adjacent positions. And so I was like, all right. I was in a writing group for spec fic, or speculative fiction writers. And someone said, hey, I was talking to the editor in reviews at Publishers Weekly. If anyone wants the job, I can refer you. Which goes again to show you how publishing is such a social field, and it helps to really build your network, not in a self-serving way, but in a genuine way, because people will pay it forward if given the chance. And so I deal with a lot of imposter syndrome. So I was really concerned. I was like, they probably won't pick me. I've never really done this professionally before. But I thought, in one of my brief moments of self-aggrandizement, worst that can happen is they can say no, right? So I applied, and they had me do a test, and they were like, "Yeah, sounds good." And that was like 3 years ago or so. And I've been doing it ever since, with slowly increasing opportunities as I've gone. And it's been my steadiest work since high school. So, yeah. And once you get your foot in your door at PW, they are actually really supportive about helping you do different things. So, yes, I started with book reviewing, and then they let me branch out to doing interviews. And this past a few months ago, actually last month, now that I think about it, I contributed to my first feature. So it's definitely allowed me to, and I was also a moderator at the first US book show. So yeah, it was really one of the better decisions I ever made. And like I said, that's allowed me to branch out in other ways too.
well, that's very interesting because, like,
Hmm.
sometimes I was having a conversation with some people about
Hmm.
how like, in a lot of these shows, like, for example, at conferences and stuff, like, you
Hmm.
don't really see that many BIPOC people.
Hmm.
And like you say, it's a social thing, right? So
Hmm.
by raising your hand and volunteering and taking part in
Hmm.
it, then you can be seen and encourage other people to join. Otherwise, they feel like an outsider. Like you say, it's like, they feel like, oh, I can't go to this thing. Everyone there doesn't look like me, right? But um,
Exactly. We self reject. in one way it makes sense, because we're like, am I going to expose myself to a lot of microaggressions if I go to this
Mhm.
setting where I'm like the only person there? And that's not insignificant. I've definitely run into some things. But I try to, as the saying goes, chalk it up to the game and just be like, okay, I'm here now. My foot is in the door. Now that I've opened that door with my own presence, as tough as it might have been, I can invite more people, and I can increasingly make this a safe environment for people like me. Um, Sorry, it's really cold, so my voice is shuddering a little bit, but um, yeah. So I try to do that, and every time I get the chance, I always try to send the ladder back down to people who, share my sexuality, or people who are also BIPOC people, like you were saying, um, because I want us all to succeed. And even if I have to be a one-person cheer squad, I'm gonna like, these people gave me this opportunity and they're letting me pass it on. Please take this so that you can either gain financially or beef up your resume, because all of these little, quote unquote, little positions and events and tasks add up, and they allow you to meet whole new people that you may not have gotten in contact with before. And it matters for us because we don't have those built-in social networks. We have to build them for ourselves.
Mhm. Yeah, well, definitely. I feel like we're kind of
Mhm.
scattered, but I think over time we are, we'll
I'm
come.
sorry. Sorry about that. I'll keep it narrower in your next questions. Go ahead.
It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry. Um, so what kind of, so when you're talking about book reviews, obviously it's needed. So what happens? Like they send you a book and they're like, can you review it? You have 2 weeks to do it. Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much. So in the beginning, they kind of they're separated into different departments, right? Children's books, and then speculative fiction, romance. And I kind of started with romance, and once I got good there, they offered to let me go into children's, and basically they'll send me a story, usually EPUB now or a galley now, and I'll look at it, and one, if it's something I'm not comfortable covering for a variety of reasons, I can send it back. Like things that may involve police-oriented violence towards Black characters is really heavy, and I don't always have the spoons or the bandwidth to deal with it, so I can send that back. Um, and then I can also just ask them, hey, I really like specific kinds of things, like, I don't know, under speculative fiction. Oh, I really like witches, or oh, I really like ghosts, or oh, I like this sort of thing. And they'll sort of keep that in mind, and they'll try to send me all of the stories that are involved in those sorts of things. And I get to decide the frequency, how often I have the time to handle it. And sometimes it's like, okay, I can do 4 in a month. And so they'll send me 4 a month. Or I say, okay, well, it's a really busy time, I can only do 1 a month. So that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty much a give and take. And they're really, or with me at least, have been very understanding about my limits and my interests.
Okay. So you also won like a Harlequin mentorship, and like,
Well,
how did
go
that
ahead, I'm
work?
sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't win it. I was a
Oh,
finalist,
okay.
which is
Oh,
really
you're a
cool.
finalist. Oh, okay.
hmm So it sort of started. I applied for a pitch contest first, with Harlequin that same year, and I think it was 2019. And I, applied for a pitch contest, and within literally 3 minutes, they made a request. They were like, "Okay, we want to see your book. Send it to us." At the same, shortly thereafter, the contest was announced. So I was like, well, they did like this book. And I wasn't ready to send it to them at that time because I was in school. So I was like, worst that can happen again is no. That's my kind of constant refrain. So I went ahead and did a synopsis and submitted, I forget how many pages. And it took a really long time. So it was like radio silence for a long time, right? And then right before they announced, they were like, I finally got a response, and they said, while you didn't win, you were one of 11 finalists, and you're invited to submit your completed work to us, to the editor at Carina Press whenever you're ready, because they really were very excited by the concept. And I mean, it promised all sorts of things. They wanted to mentor you and then potentially offer you a publishing deal. And at that point, I didn't have really any other prospects for getting my foot in the door officially. And anything that would sort of short circuit the process of, possibly years of querying, I was really, really into. So yeah, that was really just how I saw it somewhere. Twitter probably, because I try to keep an eye out for all those sorts of opportunities. And I was like, worst they can do is say no. And I went for it, and I was actually very successful. So
Cool. So how did you find your literary agent? You're from Inkwell.
I was actually very lucky in that when she actually reached out to me, I want to say 4 years ago. I was on Wattpad, and I was a lot more prolific at the time because I had more free time. And I'd written a number of queer stories, sapphic stories specifically, that were sort of touching on tropes I'd really learned in fandom and the sort of things that we just love, sort of hurt, comfort, and soulmates, and all sorts of things. And she reached out to me. She was like, hey, I'm on this website and I saw your work and I think it's so cool. And at first I was like, is this a scam?
Spammer,
And
spammer.
right, exactly, because that does happen. That is an issue. We call them poachers. And they will come and they'll try to get you to sign your work over or sign a contract, and it's not really lucrative or what have you. So I was like, no, there's no way, because remember, imposter syndrome. I was like, there's no way an agent is coming to me. And my mom, who's my best friend, was like, go, email her, get in touch with her. And I was like, no, she's not serious. She's not serious. And then I was like, oh, well, no, I've waited too long. But various really, after the Harlequin thing, I was like, maybe I do have something, because that's like several consecutive stories where people were really starting to pay attention. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna see maybe if she's still interested in working with me. So 4 years after, basically ghosting her, I went back and I was like, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Idris Grey. You wanted to represent me 4 years ago, and I have this story that people are really interested in. Would you be interested in representing me now? And she was like, all right, well, send me what you have. And I sent it to her in about, I don't want to lie, I want to say a week or 2 weeks later, she was like, absolutely. It wasn't even finished because I didn't have to be finished for the mentorship contest. But she says, absolutely. I'm so excited to work with you, and in the voice I have, and developing the voice I have. And we signed 2 weeks later. She said, it doesn't, however long it takes, I'm game. And it was such luck, and has been such luck, to have Claire representing me, because she's so passionate about my work. And whenever I show her something new, I can hear how excited she is, because she lives in New York, and I'm in Texas. And she's so passionate and such a strong advocate for everything I do as a writer. And I know how rare that is, to not only have an agent come looking for you, but to wait for you for 4 years and not feel slighted by having waited. I know how lucky that is. So I try to always really be worthy of her attention, her time, because it's such an unusual story.
Yeah, that is very unusual. Like I hear stories of people like looking for agents for years and just querying and
Same.
querying, or some of them going to conferences and they pay thousands of dollars to meet agents
Exactly.
and hope somebody likes you.
Exactly. So I know how lucky I am, and yeah, and it also tells me there's so many paths to get here. So never think, no matter how unusual yours may be, that it's not working. If it's working for you, it's working.
Now you mentioned imposter syndrome a couple of times. So
Mm-hmm.
what advice do you have for people to how to deal with this? Like it's like something you have to shake off, but like what would you tell someone?
Don't let it stop you. It's easy to think, I don't have any, think as a creator, I don't have anything to say. Everything's been said. Everyone said it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not there yet. And all of those are valid feelings to have because we've all had them, especially as marginalized people who often feel like we don't even meet the entry level criteria. But just do it anyway. The truth is, I'm in various writing groups with some really heavy hitters, and I mean, these are people you see on bestsellers lists all the time, and it doesn't go away. And the only way you can battle imposter syndrome is by making yourself the real deal. And you have to do it. You just have to force yourself to be the real deal because we're just not socialized to believe in ourselves. The system isn't socialized to want us to believe in ourselves. So we just have to do it. And if you want to hit the cliche, fake it till you make it. You're never really going to feel like you've made it. You'll be on your deathbed thinking, was I really, truly a writer the whole time? And you were. You reached people. You wrote books. You wrote stories. So just do it. Don't let it stop you. Even if you feel like you have no business being in the room, you deserve to be in the room. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Of course.
Now, how did you become a sensitivity reader? Like, how do people even how do they even get into that? Because I hear a lot about it, and I'm like, okay, so how would you find? I think Readsy is maybe a website I would go to. I'm looking to hire one, but like, how do people get into this?
So interestingly enough, there's a few different routes into it, but for me, I think it started being like a proofreader or a beta reader and just kind of seeing people's stuff and being like, like they're not quite reaching it, but not feeling like you had the authority to say, something about this isn't right. This is a little racist. This is a little homophobic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a few years ago, gosh, probably longer than it feels now, maybe 5 years ago, people were really trying, at least nominally, harder not to hurt people. And so a lot of us were just like, well, I have this experience. Let me share it with you. Let me look at your work and I'll point out to you the problem areas. And that sort of became a job. I learned about it from Justina Ireland and writing in the margins back in the day. And I signed, a form, and I really distilled my experience. Like, what do I know? What do I know from my lived experience? How can I share that? And once people start hiring you for that, it kind of just keeps going word of mouth. I've been hired by authors, by agents, by editors and publishers. And as a book reviewer, I'm also a little more keenly aware of when books are missing the mark, too late for it to not to hurt anybody. So I get, I read 100 books a year and I'm looking down and I'm like, okay, something about this is definitely going to cause harm, but there's nothing I can do because I'm an anonymous book reviewer. So it's not like I can go on Goodreads and be like, this book is super racist. This book is, it's true. This book is ableist as heck. So it's also really important for me to put my own experience out there and let people at least get one voice who might push back against all the yes people who are just like, just publish it, just publish it. You don't have to publish everything. And you don't have to publish it right away. I know it feels like it, but sometimes the story isn't ready for prime time. And the least we can do is give the book and those marginalized readers a chance not to be hurt again by an industry that they pay so little to not hurting us. So yeah, I got into it just by being in the book community.
Oh, that's really awesome. So I'm glad you're there.
Thank you very much.
Protecting people.
I'm trying.
I know you're trying. It depends, right? It depends on who the author is and who the publisher is, whether or not they care, right?
I know, whether they're at all receptive to any sort of correction or any sort of critique, because not everybody is.
Yes, not all authors like being critiqued.
Nope.
But I think probably the best authors are the ones that do have thicker skin and they can take it and they will. Oh, I think you're muted. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, someone tried to call me just now. So.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. Good.
Okay. Let's see. Like, you do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you organize your day? Like, how do you get stuff done?
Haphazardly and by the seat of my pants. Um, so I have I'm just gonna put my business up there, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So I actually struggle with perfectionism um and imposter syndrome more than even more than a lot of people. And so I'm always worried if I don't do it right, I can't do it. So I make a lot of lists. I use my calendar app. I um use a lot of devices. I check and recheck. I try really hard to do things right the first time, which is why I procrastinated on this draft I was telling you about earlier for so long. So generally, I write down when everything is due, and if I have any sense, I'll do it a week early. I don't have any sense like 90% of the time. So I binge work. So I'll have 3 reviews coming up, and I'm like, I guess we're doing all 3 today. But I usually won't read ahead. So I'm now reading 3 books in one day and writing 3 reviews and then hurriedly shooting them off. And then I get 3 sets of revisions back because we usually revise the reviews before they go out. So I'm doing revisions, and then trying to plan meetings and interviews and compose questions for my interviews and send emails. As unfortunately you've learned, sometimes the emails get forgotten. They get buried under new emails. And so I am semi-organized, at least with my writing, but the actual work can be quite haphazardly done. But I do try to get it done because as part of my OCPD, I take it very personally when I don't quite live up to my own standards. So even when I procrastinate, I give it 125%, and I'm perpetually on the verge of burnout. Um, but people appreciate the effort, and don't do that. Like, and that's my recommendation. Don't do that. Be more organized than me. But yeah, lists, apps, and just knowing when you've run out of time to procrastinate and when it's time to just get down to business makes a huge difference.
I totally understand because I'm like that too.
Right.
I got the email. I was like, yeah, whatever.
Right. I'll get to it. Put a little star on that, and then there's like 50 stars in my inbox, and I'm like, right.
Yeah. So, okay, so you are going to do a bit of a reading. So, can you tell
Hmm.
us a little bit about what you're going to read, and then you can
Well,
start?
this is a book I'm actually working on for an agent, and an editor, and I can't really talk more about it. But it's a book that's a cult mystery, featuring a lot of queer characters, and essentially a young lady who was caught up in a doomsday cult, was there at its end, sort of in a Waco-esque fashion, is rebuilding her life at 17, with a new name, when someone with an unhealthy fixation with her reappears and reminds the world of who she used to be associated with. It's something of it's a pretty dark story about um, religion, loss, grief, and trauma, but it's also um, about finding joy in spite of those things. How you can survive anything as long as you recognize you survived it. And it's called Fear Her. And it's currently being serialized on Wattpad. And I have high hopes to get it published. Like I said, an editor is very interested in it. And so that's what I would like to read. There's no trigger warnings for the selection I'm going to read. I think you said it's 5 minutes, and I read really quickly, so I may run out of words before then. But you just raise your hand or tell me time, and I'll just stop.
Yeah,
And
you can read for 10 minutes if you want. You read as long.
and it's kind of my heart story. I've been working on it a few years. it's a story, like I said, it is about a cult, but it's also about how a certain kind of demagogue, their reach can outlast them and outlive them, and how we try to survive the trauma we've gone through. All right. So,
Very cool.
fear her prologue. Virgo was 11 years old, 11 years and 9 months old when the Stargazer compound burned. It was the summer of 2011 in Sweetwater County, Wyoming. The air was dry, and the air was as dry as the cracked ground was hot. Weeks had passed with a drop of rain, and sunlight bounced off the granite mountains, magnifying the desert heat surrounding the ramshackle settlement of the divine zodiac disciples. Drought conditions had the compound rationing groundwater by order of the governor. Fresh water came in bottle trucks in from the nearest big box store over 100 miles away in Rock Spring. The day was July 27th. It was an hour to the evening meal that would see all the disciples gathering to hear Father speak while they broke bread. Virgo was crossing the compound to the Hall of Elders, her sandaled feet kicked up dust and drought-stricken crabgrass in the narrow passages between dwellings. She greeted her elders as they passed her. "Good evening, Mother," she said to a woman who had not birthed her, but who had braided her cornrows in her hair. "Good evening, Father," she said to the woman's companion who she did not know. Virgo had dozens of parents, older disciples who touched her life, leaving indelible marks, most she couldn't name. Each touched her cheek and gifted her with a smile. "Good evening, Virgo." Her zodiac was who she was. Its symbol hung from her neck in evidence. Virgo was her only name. Virgo continued her stroll through the cramped compound as the clear blue sky gained the flush of color that preceded the dark. All around her, gas lamps and electric lanterns switched on, illuminating rusted Airstream trailers and temporary clapboard buildings made permanent with use. The compound was arranged in a hexagon, rows of sheds and tents and third-hand RVs connected by peeling A-frame schoolhouses like those Virgo saw in picture books her little sisters read. They had been scavenged from abandoned towns scattered around the Great Divide Basin where Stargazer was planted. No use letting good shelter go to waste, Father said. Now the schools sheltered their family. One sat at the center of their community. It was bright and white and with a fresh coat of paint, its walls scrubbed daily to keep the grime at bay, while the other A-frames languished, peeling paint, graying and streaked in illicit graffiti Virgo pretended not to hate. This was the Hall of Elders. 4 walls and a gabled roof carved on both sides with skylights that let in the sunlight all through the day and at night admitted the glow of the stars. That was why she loved the Elders' Hall, less for the elders themselves. They fought too loudly and smiled at her too widely. When they greeted her, they hugged her too long. She respected her parents, every single one, but she feared her elders for reasons she couldn't name. Today was her day to serve the elders at Convergence. They met once a week to discuss matters of the camp, to debate matters of scripture and astronomy. It was the stars above them that dictated their lives, but the elders who handed down their judgment. And it was those judgments that would be preached to the family come the new phase of the moon. Virgo skipped up the ramp leading to the hall's entrance, humming a schoolyard ditty she sang with her siblings at recess. She found the elders milling around the meeting hall in their white gossamer robes. Like the hall, they were pristine and concerned with much more important matters than Virgo and the sandwiches she was responsible for preparing to keep them fed. Once she'd counted the numbers of elders in attendance, minus Father, who hadn't made his presence known yet, she tiptoed toward the back of the schoolhouse, where a small, makeshift kitchen had been built for the sole purpose of feeding the leaders of the divine zodiac disciples. Virgo was nearly through the swinging doors to the galley when a cool hand alighted on the back of her neck. She stiffened, shaken to her core and hating the feeling. Only 2 elders touched her there. Nobody else was allowed. Mother. The word carried dual meanings in that moment. When she turned, Virgo's own eyes stared down at her from an almost unfamiliar sun-browned face. Virgo. Her mother's hands moved to cover her cheek. Fetch Father from the barracks. The convergence is set to begin. Virgo grabbed her pendant in a sweaty hand and gave a clumsy curtsy before she turned to do as she was told. Her birth mother made her nervous. She wore the same indifferent kindness that all Virgo's parents did. Yet this felt pointed. Virgo was her daughter, like all the little girls were her children and nothing more. Virgo shot away from the kitchen door in search of the barracks where the displaced disciples slept. It wasn't often disciples were without close relations to build a homestead, but those who came alone needed some place to begin. And the schoolhouses turned sanctuaries were a natural choice. The elders' hall was no exception. The barracks were composed of a long, narrow room located just off the entrance of the schoolhouse. Crammed full of bunk beds covered in donated moth-eaten quilts, it had a lonely, abandoned quality, reminiscent of the group homes Virgo used to be placed in from time to time. Virgo slept here when there was no one to watch over her. Being close to the elders beat shambling about her tent alone. Virgo's racing heart began to slow after her unsettling encounter with her birth mother. They weren't close, yet they remained inseparable, attached. Even the symbols on their pendants matched. Regardless of the aching tie that wouldn't set Virgo free, she was a disciple and an elder had given her a task. She heard her father's voice through the door, raised in fervent prayer. Coleridge, the founder of their community and congregation, the man who had raised Stargazer from a single mobile home and 3 disciples to a robust community of almost 4,000. He terrified Virgo for all that she loved him. He amazed her. He was her father. My stars will tell me who I am. That was the first lesson he had imparted when she came to the compound. It remained embossed on her memory. My stars will know. Calling out for her father, Virgo grasped the doorknob to the barracks and pushed open the door. In that moment, her world caught flame. That's it.
Awesome. So thank you very much. So where can people, I guess people can find you on Wattpad.
Yes, Wattpad for Fear Her. That's where it is. And it's undergoing a lot of editing, like I said, for my editor. But yeah, that's where the current draft is available for consumption.
Is this editor an editor from Wattpad or someone you hire separately?
It's actually an editor from Wattpad Books.
Wow.
For a time, they've been considering publishing the story. It's unclear whether they'll ultimately do it, but yes, that's who's looking at it right now. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything else because of all the contracts I signed, but yes, that's who's currently looking at it for publication.
When is it coming out?
Well, we don't know yet because it still has to go to acquisitions. I don't know how much you know about Wattpad, but they've undergone a lot of structural changes when they were bought by Naver. I believe it's a South Korean entertainment company who also owns Webtoons. And so they're doing a lot of structural changes, but they've been interested in this particular book for the last, I want to say 2 years. And so I'm sending them a draft, and if they decide they would like to publish it, it will go to acquisitions and hopefully will be on the 2023 or 2024 publishing year.
Oh, very cool. Well, best of luck with that. And
thank you so much.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by JF Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.